Nancy Aducci, Eric Sussman, and the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, who truly did something absolutely remarkable and unprecedented today. I'm no historian, I'm not a county historian, but as far as I know, this is the first mass exoneration in the history of the county, perhaps the state. This is something that is rarely done in the country, as far as I know, where cases are looked at en masse because of some sort of law enforcement or official problem, and in the interest of justice, that we have to do a clean sweep where it's appropriate. It's something I think Eric and I have discussed many times, and I've been very persistent that I thought this was the appropriate action. Never in my wildest dreams did I think I was persuading him in any way, but ultimately I'm just extraordinarily heartened by today. I think it's a extraordinary sign of what's going on in this county, in this city, to have a law enforcement entity, an important, crucial law enforcement entity, take this step and overturn all these convictions in recognition of a systemic problem of police corruption is just extraordinarily powerful to me. So I'm going to leave it at that. I will be back to answer any questions you want. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Rodert, who's the head of the State's Attorney's Conviction Integrity Unit. And I think Leonard Gibson is going to say a few words, and then we'll answer all the questions you guys want answered.
My remarks will be brief. One of the things that the state's attorney said during the campaign and has continued to say is that one of the priorities of this office and her administration, I think, is to restore trust between the criminal justice system and its actors and the citizens of Cook County. And obviously that trust is damaged when members of the criminal justice administration, police officers, don't uphold the highest standards that most police officers, virtually all police officers, try to uphold. In these cases, we concluded that unfortunately the police were not being truthful, and we couldn't have confidence in the integrity of their reports and their testimony. And so in good conscience, we could not see these convictions stand. And so when Mr. Tepfer brought these to our attention and we reviewed these matters, and when I say we, I mean especially Assistant State's Attorney Nancy Aducci, we concluded that that trust couldn't be helped by maintaining these convictions. And so what happened in court this morning obviously is significant on the bases that Mr. Tepfer talked about. The significance I attach to it is I'd like it to be one message of what I think will be many messages to the people of this county, to tell them that they can and should trust and work with the criminal justice system to make this county a better place. Thank you.
Mr. Rodert, give us your full name, please. Spell
My name is Mark Rodert, R-O-T-E-R-T, and I am the director of the Conviction Integrity Unit, which was established by State's Attorney Fox, or at least it was my pleasure to join that unit in July of this year. It previously existed, but we are now open for business and working on cases in an effort to see what we can do to address any claims of improper behavior or of false convictions. So thank you very much.
My name is Leonard Gibson. I just want to say I'm happy for me. My name is Leonard Gibson. I'm just happy for me and my friends that someone gave us the opportunity to look at our cases, to understand that what Watts was really doing to us. I've been dealing with it. I dealt with it 3 times. I called OPS. No one never responded to me. But now I'm going to have an opportunity for it to be over with. I thank you guys.
Leonard, before you go away, would you just explain what exactly happened to you, especially with Sergeant Watts and any of the other officers?
I would never pay him. I would never give him money. So every time they come to me about money, I would never pay him. So Watts always told me, if you're not going to pay me, I'm going to get you. And every time I ran into him, he put drugs on me. Every time.
Was how much time did you spend?
From 2003 to 2005, from 2007 to 2008.
Leonard, would you explain, was it common knowledge among you and your friends and your associates and your families down there in that neighborhood that this was going on?
Yeah. Everyone knew what was going on. If you're not going to pay Watts, you're going to jail. That's just the way it was going to go. If you're not going to pay him, you're going to jail. Everyone knew what he was doing. Everyone, the families, everyone reported him. But the word never got out.
And we have been told it wasn't just Watts.
His team as well. His team played a big role in it. Watts couldn't do it by himself.
Did he come back after you, specifically after you had reported him?
I went to jail and did 2 years, 24 months for Watts. I came back home, he put another case on me.
Let's be clear. These officers are still on the force, and as is stated in Mr. Gibson's affidavit, these officers still are following him. He's taken pictures of their cars, of these officers. The same one who has participated in framing him is still watching him. So I always like to highlight the tremendous courage it's taken for these victims to continue to come forward when their lives are still in peril.
Mr. Gibson, what do you say to Superintendent Eddie Johnson and the mayor about the officers who worked on Watts' crew and who are involved in your case who are still employed by the police department?
It's a lot of foul play going on. I mean, I think everyone understands that, but is who's going to step forward and say something about it? I think that's the big thing right now. No one wants to step forward and take credibility for what's really going on.
How frustrating was it to not be believed?
I didn't understand your question.
How frustrating was it for no one to be listening to and believing what you were saying?
It was tough. It was tough. I mean, I just looked at it like I got to go do what I have to do and get it over with. I always just looked at it as get it over with because I reported it and nothing happened. So there's nothing else I could do. Every time I ran into Watts, he put drugs on me. Every time.
You've already served your time. What does this mean to you today to have your conviction vacated? You've already done the time.
I feel like a baby, a brand new baby. I don't have a background now. There's nothing on my background.
Ryan, were you surprised at this? Did you think this day would ever come?
When I talked to my buddy Josh,
Josh, would you just give us a little bit of, step back up, would you give us a little bit of the math here? How many more cases are in the hopper? And how many more cases do you think are out? Do you understand what
I do. So we've, in the last couple of years, jointly with the state's attorney's office, not a single one has been contested. There's been 26 convictions overturned that have been connected to Sergeant Watts and his crew. I believe all of them are from 2003 to 2008, roughly, and I think all of them are drug convictions. It is, the math is, I believe it's, it would be 20 individuals who have had convictions overturned. We have worked with the state's attorney's office, and we have at least a raw number that from a time period leading into, I believe, from 2004 to 2012, where there was at least 1,000 arrests that Watts was at least somewhat involved with, Watts or Muhammad, and those resulted in roughly 500 convictions. It needs to be investigated and vetted about how many of those are appropriate to overturn, and we are very much in the process of doing that. One of the things that I hope I've shown the state's attorney's office and Judge Martin is that we carefully vet these cases before we bring them. I don't just take people's words for it who come to me, and I don't go out to them. They come to me. I'm a private lawyer. I don't try to find them. If they come to me, we investigate it, we vet it, we see if it's corroborated, and then we bring it to the attention of the proper authorities.
How many members of Watts' team do you think are willing members of his team are still on the force right now?
I haven't looked exactly, but as of the most recent time I've looked in the last several months, every core member of his team who were involved in Ben Baker and Clarissa Glenn and Lionel White and some of the other ones, is my understanding, is still a member of the force, with the exception of the federally indicted and convicted Colette Muhammad and Sergeant Ronald Watts.
Are there projections to keep them from doing this again? Is somebody watching them?
I didn't hear your
So
question.
the officers who are still out there working, are you convinced that they are being watched closely to make sure this kind of behavior is still going on?
I have no idea. I mean, I personally believe that those officers have no credibility, and I believe they're criminals, and I think that they should not be making arrests in this city, certainly not testifying in this court or any other court in the city. And I certainly hope that the proper law enforcement agencies are considering whether or not I'm right and that's appropriate.
Does this clear the way for lawsuits now? Was this a hurdle you had to overcome so they can now sue the department, or have they already sued them?
You know, today these people, I think what's never quite understood is that this stuff sticks with you. These convictions stick with you. You can't get the time back you served. You can't get, it affects your ability to get jobs, housing. If you're on public aid, you're off public aid with a felony conviction. And frankly, even bigger picture, so many of the family members and everyone here, people in the community, these were poor African-American impoverished communities that in public housing that had no ability to trust law enforcement to help. There's no question that illegal activity would be going on in this public housing and such, but so many of these people were not involved in that, were caught up with that, and couldn't properly report that. They had no trust in their police, and that kind of damage lingers. And that's why I feel so hardened today. That's why I feel so great that it's the law enforcement community, it's the Cook County State's Attorney's Office that took this step, that is seeking, as Mr. Rodert said, needing to repair community and police relationships and trust in the criminal justice system. And this isn't just words anymore. This is an extraordinary, unique, and I don't know what other adverb to use, but it's a powerful, powerful step.
Can your clients now get financial compensation for the time they spent behind bars?
You know, we're going to explore their options. They may pursue, there's an ability to pursue a certificate of innocence. We're going to look at that. And they're going to look at all their options. We haven't frankly talked about it. We're going to enjoy the day, and, you know, we'll see where it goes.
So you must have been over 500 cases. Mark,
Yeah.
step up. Mark.
What's the state's attorney's position with respect to these allegations against other officers? Would your prosecutors put one of them on the stand and consider their testimony to be credible?
Well, we're going to talk today about these 15 cases. We understand where your questions are coming from. The investigation process is something that is much different in terms of what kind of comments I'm prepared to make. I'm happy to talk about the review and analysis we've made. Josh and I have already talked about getting together and looking at other matters that he'd like us to take a look at. But the Conviction Integrity Unit isn't an investigative group. It's a group that's intended to review convictions to see whether or not there's a reason to suspect that they're not valid or shouldn't be in place. Other questions about investigations or what might happen or what might or should be looked at or what is being looked at are for a different office and a different day.
Mark, could we try it a different way? Knowing what you know now and the decision you made in these cases, how could any of these other 500 convictions stand? Knowing what you know.
Well, one thing I know is that cases have to be evaluated individually and on their own facts. I'll take a look at any case that anyone wants to bring that they believe is infected by corruption. But rather than prejudge it, I'm going to tell you what I think after I've reviewed all of the evidence. I can tell you that the state's attorney's office is aware of the witnesses they put on and that we make evaluations about what we can and cannot do based on what we know about individuals. Beyond that, I'm really not able to say anything for you.
You can't say anything about your review of hundreds of other cases related to Watts. The office has said they're reviewing Watts' cases. What's going on with those?
I can say that we're working on it. We have a lot to do. It's a very exacting process. Josh correctly pointed out that he doesn't take people's word for things, and he shouldn't. Neither do we. So we have to deal with reading reports, reading transcripts, doing investigations, and we're doing that. But we have a lot to do, and we're trying to make progress.
Did you do this en masse vacating of sentences because of the facts of these individual cases or because of the fact of the involvement of Watts?
Well, we looked at each of these cases. It was Mr. Tepper who gathered them into a group of 15, but we looked at each of these cases individually, and each of those cases was reviewed. We can determine by doing so that certain patterns appear, and where those patterns appear, we believe those are indicative that there's a problem. I'm not going to get into a discussion about that pattern or what it is or it isn't or how frequent it is, because this is an evaluative process that's ongoing.
Can you say what was compelling about these cases, what the pattern was in these cases, or what you saw that was troubling?
I can say that we didn't take any of these actions without due consideration of that individual case. And I can also say that many of these individuals were talking about this problem at the time. And I acknowledge that they didn't feel that they were being heard. But one of the things that was certainly of significance to our review was that these were people who said at the time or near in time to the arrest that they had a problem with the way the police behaved. But that's one of the circumstances we look at. It's not necessarily the most important, and it's certainly not the only one.
Mark, can I ask you just kind of a color of the day question, and that is, this is an extraordinary day in Cook County, but I don't think I've ever seen a situation where the prosecutors stood with the defendants. Should we take that as a message that you're having a joint press conference with the defense attorney and with his client?
Well, I will say this. One of the things about the Conviction Integrity Unit that we think is unique is we are not a prosecuting agency. We are not an advocate for anything except what's the truth. When people like Mr. Tepper come to us and ask us to review something, we're much more interested in having a dialogue to determine what happened as opposed to getting into opposing trenches and fight about what happened. So we're happy to talk to people and we're happy to be in dialogue, because one of the things the state's attorney really wants to accomplish is to find out as best we can what's the truth.
Mr. Tepper, do most of these guys do, is Mr. Gibson typical? Most of them did 3-4 years on these cases, or there are guys that did much longer?
There were a range of sentences. Some of these people actually were sentenced to probation. I think the top one was Mr. McNary, who's not here. He was sentenced to 9 years in prison. So there's a range. If I could speak to it, one of the patterns that you saw routinely was that Watts and his team would plant extraordinary amounts of drugs on them, Class X amount of drugs, which is the top-level felony in this state, except for, of course, murder. But top-level felony in this state, and then a lot of these cases would get pled down into possession or lower levels because, and frankly, that was, that's a big systemic problem with the entire system. These cases kept losing. One of the problems and one of the things that is also so heartening is, while Mr. Rodert is right, a lot of these people did outcry and tell law enforcement and try to explain what happened. A lot of them didn't. And a lot of them didn't precisely because none of them were believed. And in fact, not only were they disbelieved, but they were retaliated against, as you heard from Mr. Gibson. Retaliated against twice in his case. Mr. Rainey, who filed a complaint with the Chicago Police Department, was retaliated against. Torres Smith, a 17-year-old kid in his affidavit, was retaliated against when him and his mother went to the police station. Many of these people testified in court, and judges did not believe that this was happening. And, one of the first page of my petition, what I refer to all the time, is Judge Tooman saying, if we find out later that what you're saying is true, he said this to Ben Baker and Clarissa Glenn, then there's no judge in this building who would be willing to stand by these convictions. And I think that's true for every one of these cases where these guys are substantively involved, and whether or not they said it at the time or not. So
are these guys still in jail? Are they on these cases?
Still in custody. Are these cases that were vacated today or separate cases?
Separate cases.
Marshall, what does this mean for their futures, for their opportunities for employment, all of that kind of stuff?
So I'll answer the first question. It's easier. Andre McNary's in prison on an unrelated case in the Department of Corrections. I'll be communicating with the state's attorney's office and see if there's a reason why, with today's vacating of his conviction, he should be released sooner or get a lesser sentence on that. It's not a Watts-related case. Mr. Jamel Sanders, I believe, is in county jail. I don't actually know anything about it. And what was the other question?
Maybe Leonard could touch on it as well, but what does this mean in terms of your future personally, as far as your opportunities for employment, that kind of thing?
I just feel like I have the opportunity to do whatever. I feel like I have the opportunity to do whatever I want to do now. It's like a new life for me.
How old are you, Mr.
I'm 36 years old. I mean, I can do whatever I want to do right now.
If you had to sum up what this meant to your life, how would you sum it up for us and be allowed?
I just feel like right now it's a brand new beginning for me. I can start over, do what I want to do. Like I said, I just feel like a brand new baby. It's a new life for me.
But for you and all of these guys, this altered your life. Can you talk a bit about what might have been should this never happen?
I mean, right now we're in a position where we're not getting jobs. We're in a position where we all try. It's all because backgrounds, loaded up cases on our background, year after year after year, going through what Watts put on us. I mean, it's tough for us all right now, but I mean, now we have an opportunity to do something better with our life. And hopefully if we make it happen.
Hi.
Your name, sir?
My name is Robert Lindsay.
Right up close and loud.
It's all my family still.
I'm sorry,
I wasn't.
Yeah, step
This
close.
is
Say your name?
Robert Lindsay.
Rob, he's not one of
Robert
the...
Lindsay.
No.
I'm in the family with them.
Okay.
They don't want to speak. We all.
All right, we're going to let Mr. Thomas, Philip Thomas, speak.
Philip Thomas?
Morning. Yeah, Philip Thomas, Phillip, Thomas. I'm 58 years old right now. I've been victimized by this crew, Sergeant Watts, now Sergeant Al and Muhammad, the whole crew. They victimized me for years. It had got to the point where when I stepped outside my door, I felt like I had to run the gauntlet. There's no way of getting away from them. They were playing drugs on you. They would beat you. They came to court and testified in my case. He got on the stand as a credible police officer. And all the time, it was nothing but lies. Now I have vindication. It's very sad to think that we as a people, and I mean all of us in the United States, have to go through this type of stuff.
How much time did you spend in prison behind Watts?
I was victimized twice. The first time I was sentenced to 4.5 years. Second time I was sentenced to 6 years. I served 3 years. I'm sorry, my lawyer.
No, go ahead, sorry.
I served 3 years on the first one, and I served 3.5 years on the second one.
Okay. So Mr. Thomas's case is interesting. He went to trial. A lot of these people, he represented himself pro se. Part of the reason he represented himself is because he was innocent, and his theory of defense was that he was framed, and that was not something that was winning, and public defenders and who was representing him weren't going to raise or comfortable raising that defense, and he said, well, I got to tell the truth. And Mr. Thomas cross-examined two of the police officers who were still on the force, Alvin Jones and Ellsworth Smith, asking them, didn't you frame me? Didn't you work with Ronald Watts and frame me? And, and he was convicted. And I think Judge Sachs specifically commended him for a job well done many times, during his trial. But it's a troubling and interesting case.
How angry are you?
Very angry. Angry. A certain amount of anxiety goes along with serving time when you're innocent. Like was mentioned before, you can't hardly find a job, finding housing, the detachment with your family, spend so many years away. It's just hard. It's hardship all the way around. Right now, I'm filing for disability. The better years of my life was spent running from them and doing time in penitentiary.
Mr. Thomas, would you explain, just as you heard us ask previously, to what extent was it common knowledge among you and your neighbors that this tactical team was running a dirty operation?
It was common knowledge, but it was nothing that could be done about it besides report them, which had been done many times. And as you can see, as witness of my standing there, talking about it didn't do any good because I was still convicted.
And it wasn't just Watts and Muhammad?
No, sir. It was several police officers on all 3 shifts, and they all worked together. Not only would they frame you, they would beat you, put guns to your head. They did everything that a crooked cop would do.
All right, I think we've gotten a lot. You got more? Okay.
In addition to 20, how many are you vetting right now? How many folks have come through and alleged similar things to you?
I don't have the raw numbers. My wonderful colleague Sean Starr is a great assistant. I don't even know where he is right now, but he's and a lot of my team. I think we're vetting somewhere between a dozen to 2 dozen currently.
Can I just confirm something?
You want to be done? Yeah. Okay.
Thanks. So I just wanted to get on the record that this case-by-case basis a review of Watts-related incidents continues in your unit.
Well, yes, to the extent people and other lawyers behind me and in the room right now have assured me that they're going to keep us busy and they're going to bring more cases. So that's what I expect, is that we're going to continue to be reviewing these matters.
At any point, will that investigation be expanded to some of the other cops who are allegedly involved in this?
Well, again, I want to draw a distinction. I'm investigating what the historic facts were in an effort to try and find out what the just result should be. Investigating a new and additional matter, to the extent that's being done, you're talking to the wrong person for information about it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Who's the right person? Who's the right person? I'm serious. You're here for the state's attorney's office. Who's the right person? Is that it? This is a question for months.
Hey, Andy. Robert. How's it going? Good to see you. That's a lot. Hopefully that won't get done. All right. Good seeing you.